Go ahead, Neeta.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thank IAP Delhi, the organizers of PCNI and NIPID for this kind invitation. And the topic given to me is this time is how have I missed an immune deficiency? Over the next few minutes, I think we'll go through some cases where immunodeficiency was not thought of initially, but came up as the final diagnosis. So I work in this institute, like Dr. Sahai just mentioned. So immune deficiencies initially were called primary immune deficiencies. Now the terminology has changed to human inborn errors of immunity, like inborn errors of metabolism. Now these are called inborn errors of immunity. And inborn errors of immunity. See, we need the immune system for fighting infections, for fighting malignancy, and for fighting autoimmunity. So if somebody has an autoimmune disease, that just means that their immune surveillance system is not working, or there are clones of cells which have escaped the immune surveillance in the body. So any child or a person with autoimmunity would essentially have something which is deficient in the immune system of that person. And there are new groups of disorders like immune dysregulation and autoinflammation, which have also come up in the recent years. When I say come up, these are all being recently diagnosed. So this is one favorite quote which I usually use, that the beginning and the end were always there before the beginning and after the end. So this is from T.S. Eliot. So that just means that there is a continuum, there is a continuous process. And when we see a patient, when we see a child admitted with us with a particular disease, that's just one part of that continuous process. So there might have been something which started off before, or their child might evolve into something later. And that is essentially what immune deficiency is all about. It's essentially identifying the pattern in which the child has come and seeing whether there's something more than what is actually meeting the eye right away. So currently, as per the International Union of Immune Deficiencies, more than 400 genetic defects have been classified, all of them monogenic disorders, and more than 400 phenotypes have been defined. So if a child presents like this is a particular phenotype, you have to suspect this. So that kind of definitions have come up, and all these have come up in the recent years because of the advent of next generation sequencing that is available to us for identifying these mutations. So before I start, a little bit of introduction on what the immune system is all about. So as we all know, immune system starts from the bone marrow. Bone marrow has myelogenesis, red cell, as well as platelet production occurs inside the bone marrow per se. A bit of lymphocytes are produced there, and finally lymphocytes mature into B lymphocytes in the bone marrow itself and secondary lymphoid organs. Whereas the T lymphocyte, after the initial development, it goes to the thymus and further development occurs in the thymus. So we can imagine all these, any disorder pertaining to these disorders. So whether it is like any hematological condition, any malignancy, a child with autoimmunity, all of them would have a direct link to immune system. And that is what is how these presentations of these disorders are also through the immune deficiency pattern. So this is the current classification. And for people who have been following immune deficiency would know that initially there were 6 groups of disorders, then they evolved and may become 8. And now they've included bone marrow failure disorders and something which is interesting called phenocopies also in the current classification system. So essentially, if you have B cell and T cell deficiency, that is called combined immune deficiency. So combined immunodeficiency, if it is like a normal, a SCID-like phenotype, it comes in the first group, whereas a combined immunodeficiency with some syndromic like DiGeorge syndrome, etc., would come here. A patient would have predominantly B cell deficiency only, would be antibody deficiency. Then there are HLH-like conditions or immune dysregulations, phagocytic disorders, which would be essentially neutrophilic disorders and macrophage disorders, functional disorders there. Intrinsic and innate immune system disorders, again, new conditions which are coming up because of signaling pathways or cytokine disorders, and these are not rare at all. So the cases which I'm presenting today are only the ones which are difficult cases from 2019. So these are not rare at all, and this is all amongst us. Then immune autoinflammatory disorders, children who have repeated fevers and essentially would be seen by pediatricians, and when there are joint symptoms, they would go to rheumatologists for evaluation. Complement disorders, again coming up with repeated infections or very early onset autoimmunity. Marrow failure comes to a hematologist, and phenocopys is a different condition where there are some acquired disorders which are going to present like primary immune disorders. The problem is that we fail to recognize as clinicians. It's not obvious always. There is nothing which is phenotypically evident immediately on presentation. So unless we think about it, it's not very clear. Even when we think about it, we don't know how to get these investigations done. It's quite difficult. It requires a lot of collaboration to get to a final diagnosis. Early diagnosis definitely helps us in saving life of the child, or saving, at least in the frame. When I usually tell for parents to invest in that investigation, so that if it is an expensive investigation, for that at least this can be prevented in the next birth. And of course, if you identify early, you would save an organ, especially in many conditions, it is the lung. So by the time children come to us, they're already having chronic lung disease or chronic liver disease. And after that, there's no point really even doing anything, any definitive treatment, because even the child is already has an organ which is completely damaged. So these are the compartments of the immune systems. You have the innate immune system with which we are born with, which include the phagocytes and the complement system. Then the adaptive immune system, which includes the B and the T cells. So here we'll just briefly see, I'm not going into the approach part at all, but just to make a discussion interesting. So B cell disorders, they would generally present with recurrent bacterial infections, sometimes giardia, and sometimes exaggerated response to a viral infection like a enteroviral infection, especially meningitis or polio, paralytic polio, etc. These can be the presentation of B cell immunodeficiencies. And here again, just a plain CBC and an immunoglobulin profile, which is available in almost every town of our country. This can be done easily, and that can actually guide us towards further diagnosis. Why I'm saying this is, many a times diagnosis is delayed by 5 years, 8 years. Then at that point, then there's no point in diagnosing it further for that particular child. And if we are suspecting a simple B cell enumeration by flow cytometry, again, flow cytometry is not difficult these days to get to a diagnosis. If we are suspecting a T cell disorder, T cell disorders usually present with, since T cells are kind of the overall controllers of the immune system. If you have a T cell defect, you can have bacterial, viral, fungal, protozoal, mycobacterial. Any of these infections are possible if these children who have very severe T cell deficiencies. That is why they're going to present very early. They at times present with severe viral infections. They present with cryptosporidia, almost like HIV, how HIV presents. Except that these are going to be very early in life, that just less than 6 months of age. And here again, CBC testing, very, very useful, because there will be lymphopenia, which is very obvious. And if we have absolute lymphocyte counts which are low, a subset analysis, which includes TB and NK, can be easily done. And this is again another presentation, how these SCID babies are going to come to us. And many of these babies would have failure to thrive as a definitive feature. Third is children who present with phagocytic disorders. This I said, which includes neutrophil number and neutrophil function. So neutrophils are required for what all infections? They are required for bacteria and for fungi. So these are two things for which neutrophils are required in our body. So among bacterial infections, you could have these particular type of bacterial infections like Pseudomonas, Nocardia, Salmonella, etc., which are very, very specific through the neutrophil and the reactive oxygen species pathway, how these infections are handled in our body. And among fungi, we have Aspergillus also, which can cause these defects can also cause repeated aspergillosis. And these children, again, first thing you do is just to, in the CBC, look for a neutrophil count. If you have neutropenia, then go ahead along with the evaluation of neutropenia, like bone marrow evaluation further. If the neutrophils are normal to high, then again, two simple tests. One is nitroblue tetrasolium, which is a slide-based test, which can be done easily in the pathology lab. And DHR is a flow-based test. Again, not so difficult at least in the major cities. So these investigations can guide us to what is called CGD, chronic granulomatous disease, which is again a functional disorder. And finally, we have complement disorders. They present with bacterial infections like Neisseria meningitis. So any child who comes with Neisseria meningitis infection should have a complement levels tested. And some of these complement disorders, like the early complement disorders, can come with SLE. So early onset lupus, early onset autoimmunity, then also you suspect children with complement disorders. So what helps us in reaching a diagnosis is, of course, at the age of the onset. If the child is coming less than 6 months versus after 6 months or after 5 years of age, we do know how different parts of the immune system is going to present. Whether it is a boy or a girl, a gender and a family history has a lot of helps us in a lot, because many of these disorders are X-linked. Again, to narrow it down, it becomes easier. So, but what helps in practice is to see what is unusual in that case. So if you think that this is not a pneumonia which is normal, or this is not a child who is normal because after every diarrhea he's going to come back with another episode of diarrhea. So that kind of unusual pattern is what we should be looking out for. Any disease, so any specialty. So I do hemato-oncology. For me, a child who is leukemia on treatment not responding, or a child who is leukemia on treatment having a lot of infections, an ITP child having a lot of infections, a child with autoimmune hemolytic anemia with infection. So all of that is unusual for me. So similarly, a child with another autoimmunity, say you have a nephritis with a hemolytic anemia, or a nephritis with a leukoderma, vitiligo. So these are multiple autoimmunity, children with multiple optim. So all that kind of unusual pattern can be looked out for. And if possible, whether we can identify a particular compartment, like based on this pattern of infection, like if it is always aspergillosis, or if it is always mycobacteria, can we kind of point down to this is this, and then go ahead with further evaluation. So these are the only things that actually help us in practice, because phenotypically many of these children are going to look normal. There are no classical features that we look out for while examining these children. Age, I said, is helpful. There are particular disorders like SCID and some neutrophilic disorders, phagocytic disorders that come very early in life, because these are innate immune system that should be present at birth, and if it's not there, they're going to present with features immediately. After 6 months of age, most of the antibody deficiencies come up here, because maternal antibody is out of the system. The baby should have started producing antibodies by now, but that is not there. Then they start presenting. And after 5 years, some of the lesser severe disorders like specific antibody disorders or CVID, etc., can present. And like I said, gender helps in a lot of these genetic disorders. And always ask for family history of not only infection, but also ask autoimmunity and malignancy. You often have uncles who have malignancy, or maternal history as an X-linked history of disorders in the family, or other children who have had similar illness. Now we'll see case by case. So we are going to see few cases who presented with infection as the primary matter, and how the diagnosis was missed initially. So this is a 7-year-old boy. He's the 5th born in the family. So you can see that previously two male children have died, and there are 2 girls who have been okay. So very, very striking history from day one. A normal birth weight child, but he's been symptomatic since 9 months of age. And what are the infections that he has had? He has mainly had respiratory illnesses, which have started at 7 months of age, multiple respiratory infections. So many times, the practice is that we give a lot of antibiotics initially. After a while, we know that the trigger, when they're going to have repeated infections, then many of them get labeled as asthma. And even having bronchodilators or something which is given constantly, inhaled corticosteroids, etc., do help these children also. So many of these children already are diagnosed and branded as this diagnosis before they as asthma before they come to us. So he is, since the last 4 years, from 3 years of age, he's been having persistent of difficulty in sleeping, early morning wheezing, all that's going on. Only the dose of MDI has been tapered multiple times, as in modified multiple times. Other than this, what else does he have? He has recurrent ER discharge. Again, none of them has been cultured so far, always given antibiotics. And 3 hospital admissions till 2019. And there were ICU admissions as well in this. 1 episode of fever without focus was diagnosed as meningitis and treated, and another dengue episode, which was uneventful. At 7 years, finally, the pediatrician who referred found the child had a low IgG and was advised IVIG prophylaxis. But before 7 years, how many infections? Probably at least 1 infection every month or so. So this kind of presentation, such severe phenotype, right, living very close to a metro, even then not getting a diagnosis. And even though they were advised IVIG, they did not start at the time of presenting to our center. So if you can see height for a 7-year-old child, the child is not growing well. No phenotypic features. Child already has baseline tachypnea with saturation is 94% in room air with wheeze, and no other organ involvement. And these are the basic investigations that you do. When you do CBC, you can see that the neutrophil count is slightly low, which is again not too low, as in it's for 9,800 in a child who is repeatedly infected. I would have probably expected a slightly high. But more importantly, the absolute lymphocyte count. The lymphocyte count is normal. The lymphocyte count is normal. For me, what is the clinical diagnosis? It would be B-cell antibody deficiency only, because it's presented late, because it is a child with recurrent cyanopulmonary infection. So that would, a B-cell defect is the phenotype that the child has come with. But there are some red herrings in this case. So anyway, so when you do a baseline CBC, absolute lymphocyte count is normal. And if you look at the immunoglobulin levels, your immunoglobulin A and G are low. IgM is on the higher side. So that is not a good thing. So if it was a B-cell antibody deficiency, plain and simple X-linked A-gamma globulinemia, it should have had low IgM as well. Again, these are simple investigations you do in the morning, you'll get the report by afternoon. What about the next investigation? Lymphocyte subsets. And when you see lymphocyte subsets, this is not something I did. This test was done 2 years prior also, but at that time, no treatment was started. And so this lymphocyte subset, there was some B antibody deficiency, which was B, as in B cells were on the lower side. And that's probably why he was advised IVIG later on when the child presented. But then again, not very low. In B antibody deficiency, this is usually less than 2%. So when you don't have severe B antibody deficiency, suspecting X-linked A-gamma globulinemia would be fallacious. So this is the condition. So this is the gap in diagnosis is, despite recurrent infections and the being labeled as moderate asthma, primary immune deficiency was not thought of at that point. And the child has had growth also affected and a strong X-linked history. Despite that, that was not done. And even when diagnosed, it was labeled as B-cell deficiency and looked further, because even despite having a B-cell enumeration, which was not very low. So final, when you get the genetic evaluation done, this is a combined antibody deficiency. And what difference does it make? What difference does it make whether it is X-linked A-gamma globulinemia or X-linked hyper IgM syndrome? There is a whole lot of difference. X-linked A-gamma globulinemia is a reasonably easy to manage condition where you can have IgG replacement will keep them okay, provided you start early, not after like chronic lung disease has set in, but generally these children do well. Whereas X-linked hyper IgM, the children, they require, in addition to, it's a T-cell disorder, it is not a B-cell antibody deficiency, and these children would require early BMT to get them through. And this was not done, and now he is actually past the time is over, and now with the CLD in place, would be very, very difficult for him to get to further evaluation. So this is how the B-cell antibody, B-cell development is. So early in the development, this is the mutation pies, this is the difference. So this is the difference. X-linked A-gamma globulinemia comes here, whereas hyper IgM comes a little later. And in hyper IgM, the primary defect is the conversation between a T cell and a B cell is defective. And that is why primarily it is called a T cell defect. It's going to behave like a skid to us. Another case, a 2-year-old boy from Meerut. Again, the growth centiles itself show us that the child was born normally, but then he is falling off the charts. When you look at infections, pneumonia was treated as GER also initially. By 1.5 years, he has had fever, cervical lymph nodes, and lymph nodes aspirated Staphylococcus aureus, and he's got E. coli. Again, bacterial infections primarily, but multiple infections, and even as in 2 of these infections should have been good enough for a further evaluation. So finally, the last center where he was suspected to have SCID, and he was given IVIG, and then he was referred. He was febrile, again hypoxic in room air. By the time the child is presenting, it's already too late. It's hypoxic in room air, failing to thrive with oral candidiasis. This is a typical SCID phenotype. As in this is how children present with SCID. This is children who are failing to thrive, oral candidiasis, respiratory infection. We should be catching them before they have respiratory infections which cause hypoxia, which is usually PCP, CMV, or any of the other viral infections that cause interstitial lung disease. So this is the presentation, and this is the suspicion also. The final suspicion at 2 years of age is SCID, but there are some problems in the diagnosis. So if you see SCID, we should have had lymphopenia. Lymphopenia is not seen here. So here again, absolute lymphocyte count is not too low. Immunoglobulin levels, if you can see, immunoglobulin levels aren't low either. So if a SCID patient should have bang low, IgA low, IgM low, IgG low kind of presentation. But at 2 years, if his immunoglobulin levels is not low either. So when you evaluate again, any evaluation of child with any primary immune deficiency would be investigations for infection, investigation for the disease per se. So infection investigations, again, a lot many more bacteria came up, Klebsiella, Mycoplasma, E. coli. So unusual that a SCID baby who is going to come up with so many bacterial infection, nothing viral is coming up at all. Again, lymphocyte subset was normal. So the gap in diagnosis, of course, it's that there was recurrent infection and mislabeled as GER initially, not picked up by 2 years. As in 2 years is almost the maximum a SCID baby will live. No, otherwise they usually are, it's a fatal condition by 1 to 2 years of age. So it could have been picked up early, but somehow it probably they did not follow up also properly. So early missed diagnosis again, even when the child was failing to thrive. Second is lymphadenopathy. Lymph nodes are generally not seen in SCID and B cell deficiencies also. But here you had large lymph nodes, there some aspirated Staph aureus also. Despite that, did not think further. So it could, again, thought of as SCID, good, but there could have been something else which have been underlying. So here we had neutrophils which were a little on the higher side. Lymphocytes were normal. Lymphocyte subsets were also normal. So final diagnosis, just a plain simple NBT test will show you that NBT test shows 0% activity. It was chronic granulomatous disease. Again, a severe condition, presents very early in life, and X-linked disorder. And the only thing we can actually help the family is to prevent another birth because it's already too late. The second group of conditions I want to show you is highlight is autoimmunity. Autoimmunity presenting as a presenting feature of an immune deficiency is being increasingly diagnosed, and lot of conditions. So many of them is it's in parallel with rheumatology presentations as well. So I'll focus on some of the cytopenias that have come up. So this is a 17-year-old girl, repeated infections from 2 months of age. And at 17 years, you can see what is her weight and what is her height. And again, respiratory infections predominantly on a lot of inhalers, multiple life-threatening infections till 4 years of age. Finally, at 4 years of age, child was shown to a center in Delhi where she was diagnosed as SCID and started on treatment. And she's been on treatment since then. What happened later? At 7 to 8 years of age, she's had an episode of autoimmune hemolytic anemia. So not unusual for CVID to come up as AIHA. The only thing unusual is that CVID usually does not present less than 2 years of age. It is again an antibody deficiency, which is relatively easier to manage. But this is a very severe phenotype, which has come from 2 months and with so much of FTT. So this definitely is not a CVID, a classical CVID phenotype. So here again, AIHA, multiple centers have seen the child controlled on antibiotics, steroids and immune suppressants. And after like 8 to 8.5 years of age, this medicines were tapered and steroids were slowly taken off. And no further evaluation was advised for AIHA at that time. Later, since 10 years of age, like for the last 7 years, she's been having these kind of lesions in her leg. And this was variably diagnosed as cutaneous tuberculosis, multiple skin biopsies. Every time there is a granuloma, and some bacterial infections also keep getting cultured from here. This AFB was never seen any of this. None of the cultures showed AFB, none of the biopsies showed AFB, but still she's been on ATT for a very long time. And again, drug-induced hepatitis and a lot of ancillary problems along with the ATT. So if you see her, she has a little bit lower absolute lymphocyte count, not very low. Immunoglobulin A is low, M is low, and since she's on IgG replacement, you can't really interpret the IgG level. But pan, hypo, gamma, because all these three are low, and E is on the higher side. So E coming up high, only very few conditions in immune deficiency have very high E, that is seen. And the subsets which were done earlier from the other center were shown low B and normal T cells. And so initial diagnosis, again, in this case, till 4 years of age, absolutely no diagnosis. And an AIHA also, which was there as a red herring, but then no further evaluation. And even when we are diagnosing a CVID, such severe FTT, such a normal ALC, not very low B cells, all of them were actually pointing against a CVID phenotype, and the fact that she's still getting infections despite being on IVIG prophylaxis. So these are conditions which tell you that this is not a straightforward CVID, and this actually was But why did a SCID survive more than 2 years of age? Because this was a SCID with a hypomorphic mutation. And these kind of babies are called Omenn syndrome. And they present with lymphadenopathy, a lot of inflammatory features which come up along with SCID, infections with inflammation and hepatosplenomegaly, skin rash, all the very classically described in Omenn syndrome. But the point is we are too late. At 17 years of age with so much of morbidity, there's hardly anything that can be done. If this baby was diagnosed, say, in infancy, probably some therapeutic intervention like BMT could have been done. Although she's an adopted child, I don't know how we could have gotten a donor, but an unrelated donor could have been a possibility. So that is why a correct diagnosis and a timely diagnosis is very important. I'm skipping the slides on approach to a SCID. I've just put it. I think the recording will be available later. A simple CBC tells us that there is lymphopenia in SCID. And SCID is something which is going to come through pediatricians only. It's not going to present with any other specialty. So immunoglobulin assay, if we are having repeatedly sick babies, immunoglobulin assay and a low lymphocyte count should be done. And if we are having low lymphocyte count, an immunophenotyping can be easily ordered, especially in the metros. And X-ray will help you. X-ray can show absenthymus. It can show costochondral junction being prominent in certain variants of SCID. And genetic evaluation again can be done, not necessary for diagnosis, but it can be done easily. And another, so this Omenn syndrome variant is going to come to us with this kind of skin rash, dry, scaly skin, and alopecia. So these are the differential diagnoses which are usually thought of early before SCID is actually atopic dermatitis or biotinidase deficiency. Atopy, especially because IgE is going to be high in these babies. So eosinophilia, raised IgE are all features suggestive of Omenn syndrome and a very difficult phenotype to treat. But if we pick them up early, they can be managed. So children who come with autoimmunity, if they are early onset, if they are persistent autoimmunity, if there are multiple systems involved, if they are refractory to treatment, or if you have autoimmunity with infection, like in this case, you have some AIHA going on, parallelly granulomas going on, parallelly respiratory infections. So then you think of there is something underlying. And finally,
Dr. You have last 3 minutes.
I'm just finishing it. So this is a child who was diagnosed as a standard risk ALL, and he has been started on. So this is an 8-year-old boy, previously well. The infection profile while managing is horrendous. You have sepsis, fungal sepsis, multiple skin abscesses, pneumothorax, meningitis, this kind of presentation. So even though ALL per se could explain many of this, but it is not plain and simple ALL, and it turned out to be a marrow failure syndrome, which has autoimmunity called SAMDL9, one of the recently diagnosed marrow failure syndromes. And another one, GATA2, which was published also earlier. So this is a myeloid leukemia child with warts in his skin. It can mimic, PID can mimic multiple other conditions. So this is a recent child who was referred as JMML from another center with severe anemia, transfusion dependent state, finally turned out to be Mendelian susceptibility to mycobacterial disease. And another child referred as Hodgkin lymphoma, multiple lymphadenopathy, and biopsied also, but a simple investigation, that is a CBC, showed that it was severe neutropenia. Bone marrow showed it is severe neutropenia with neutrophilic arrest, suggestive of congenital neutropenia. So these are simple investigations that would tell us, and the child is absolutely prophylaxis. They don't have another sibling for transplant. So this is my only take-home message there. So when we think, we are very, very comfortable with many diagnoses, but at times we have to look out of the box. When you hear hoofbeats, the thing that comes in your mind is horses, but start thinking about zebras also. Zebras also can present with, they can also cause hoofbeats. So this is taken from the Immunodeficiency Foundation of North America. It is their logo. So this is probably the only take-home message from my side today. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Neeta, for such a wonderful presentation. House is open for questions. Dr. Pankaj has asked one question. Should we do immunodeficiency screening in all culture positive patients in NICU and PICU?
So that depends on the type of culture positive. If it's a standard infection that we usually see in NICU, PICU setting, definitely no. But if you have had children who had presented with infections earlier, this is part of a long process of infection, like a child improved, went home, came back with a persistent pneumonia, that kind of presentation, definitely investigate. If you have an abnormal organism, like if you are getting Chromobacterium violation, if you are getting nocardia, they have no business in a PICU setting unless there is an immune deficiency. So there are fungi if they are coming up. Candida comes up very frequently, which is okay. But if you are getting Aspergillus, if you're getting any other fungi, definitely immune system has to be looked into. So it's basically a combination of the type of infection and the history that we are getting.
Dr. Neeta, please stop slide sharing.
Oh, sorry.
I think best is to keep it in back of your mind whenever you see a child coming with repeated infections, especially severe kind of infections or unusual infections.
Yes, sir.
So, any other comments by our respectable chairpersons? So,
Yes, I just
Important
wanted
thing
to
is just
thank.
we suspect it early and try to prevent the hand organ damage. So maybe by providing prophylaxis, antibiotic or immunoglobulin and refer it early to the specialist.
I think a lot of end organ damage is correctly said. It's the most important thing. Like if you have,
Yes.
for example, nephrotic syndrome, if you have children who are not responding, then there is something else that should be looked into. HUS, TTP, all of them have underlying genetic mutations now. So this is that, and that unless you treat that, this child is never going to get better.
Thank you, Dr. Neeta.
so thank you all the chairpersons. And now we proceed to next two sessions that are dedicated to allergy. The first session is anaphylaxis at my clinic is by Dr. Vikas Taneja, and second is allergy testing by Dr. Neeraj Gupta. For these, I invite chairperson